brought up the anthropologists who went into these same places and came up with a completely different set of observations than the administrators and the public officials, economists, etc. It reminded me that for a long time, cities in our field were looked at as a set of fixed assets and capital and resources, whereas they're increasingly being seen as being held together by intangible equity, which has to do with the intelligence that's embedded, if you like, in sometimes even archaic social, let's say, attributes or assets that are embedded in the societies themselves. So I'm wondering if there's aspects of economics that is beginning to try to, in some ways, think about and quantify, I don't know if that's the right word when it comes to the informal, but to somehow begin to manipulate and develop systematic ways of thinking about this thing that we could say is the informal.
Yeah, well, the answer is yes, and in a way, some of the work that Eleanor Ostrom done is in that. She's a political scientist, but is in that strand. Bob Putnam, ideas of social capital, which probably not in the mainstream of economics, but it'll work. Other people have done a part of that script that I've written about this, Canero. So a lot of people have talked about it. The kinds of models that people use to think about it in more formal terms are often models of what we call repeated games, where people interact and have their interactions. Good behavior is enforced.
Like a game theory?
Game theory, yeah, repeated game theory. So it's not just one interaction, it's repeated interactions are the basic models that people use to study this. Yeah, there's actually quite a rich literature. One of the I mentioned before. I think one of the aspects of quality of life that show up in a lot of studies are social connectedness, the kinds of interactions that people have, the quantity of quality of interactions. And people have been studying that frequency of interactions. One of the concerns about the urban areas in some African cities is that the growth, people leave. There were stable communities in the villages from which they came, in which those kinds of mechanisms we call social control work, and those ensure all kinds of good behavior and discourage adverse behavior. But when they move to the city, there is, at least initially, much more anonymity, much less interaction. So on the one hand, there is a problem of isolation, which is a question of lowering the quality of life. But there's also much less ability to enforce norms of behavior. And that's why you get more crime, you get more, and particularly with, and in a lot of African cities traditionally, and this may change going forward, traditionally a lot of people were there, were not rooted in the city. So they lived in the city, but that wasn't what they viewed as their home. Their home was back in the village. And that's even true, this has some advantages for urban resilience, but not for urban, for creating an urban, well-functioning urban area. So an example of that was when Thailand had its big financial crisis 10, 12 years ago. What happened was that large numbers of people in the urban area went back to their villages. They had kept all their ties with villages. And the city just sort of weakened overnight. It was part of the resiliency of Thailand at the time, and also indicates the problem of cities that people are not really attached or as attached to the city, or have more of a double attachment, or more the primary identity is to the village. And that's really true in a lot of African cities. People go back to their villages once, twice, 3 times a year for all public occasions, for all private and public occasions. And that, of course, means that the cities are less of a social unit than they are in